Lots to get to. This remnants of Hurricane Helene. Let me just start this way. Our government has certain central responsibilities. It's not redistributing wealth. It's not mandating what type of lawnmower or automobile you can have, electric vehicles. 98% of what the federal government does, it's not even supposed to do. But those core functions, securing the border, safety in the streets, natural disasters to give a helping hand, obviously the ruling class, this administration, Harris and Biden, are over their heads. And I'm going to tell you why. Number of reasons. Number one, they're incompetent. Number two, they're driven by ideology. Number three, they're lazy. Kamala Harris did not attend any pre-hurricane meetings at FEMA the way Trump did and Pence did about locating certain supplies, personnel, backup personnel. They were not involved in any of it. Kamala Harris was not involved in any of it. 4 days on the West Coast. She knew this storm was coming. We all knew this storm was coming. All you have to do is watch any of the weather channels, Fox Channel, listen to the radio. They told us this was going to be a monster, and it is. And it was. That's number one. Number two, some of you may not like this, but I remember the response to Katrina in New Orleans, and I remember the response to Puerto Rico and so forth under Donald Trump. I find it amazing that in the middle of this and in the middle of hurricane season, Mayorkas announces that they don't have enough money. $1.4 billion going to illegal aliens. And then we point this out when we hear this, when we read this, they tell us we don't know what we're talking about. Borders wide open, they tell us we don't know what we're talking about. Kamala Harris wants you to believe she gives a damn about you. She doesn't. And then this jobs number, 256,000 jobs created. Let me tell you something. That's being celebrated. It's being heralded as unbelievable. Blockbuster. You should see the headlines. Even some of these so-called finance and economic hosts on these various programs. Unbelievable. The numbers are great. No, they're not. That's about 5,000 jobs per state. Have you thought about it that way, Mr. Producer? It's nothing. I remember the Reagan years when we were creating 750,000 jobs a month. No, we're not. This isn't some great thing. It is for Washington, D.C., perhaps Wall Street and the stock market, but it isn't. It's not that great at all. And they can say it all they want, and I'll respond all I want. That's not a great number. But they were predicting 140,000. Who was? What moronic egghead was predicting that? Well, we're going to have a soft landing. Soft landing. You having a soft landing, America? And exactly what I said took place when it came to the Longshoremen's Union. Behind the scenes, Biden and Harris told the union and the other party, the maritime group, come to some kind of deal before the election. Some kind of deal, put the rest of it off after the election. And they did. So rather than their ironclad, phrase the left likes to use when they don't mean it, 77% salary increase, the longshoreman boss at least tentatively agreed to 62%. It's a big difference. But they'll work on the automation on January 15th. Oh, I see. So they're trying to do everything humanly possible to ensure that Harris is elected president, including phony numbers. No, they're real numbers, but the phony number interpretation, including with the Longshoremen's Union and all the rest of that stuff. And there's a lot more I do want to get into this evening. We're also going to have Corey Mills on the program. He's a representative from Florida. This guy is spectacular. He's a veteran, combat veteran. But he goes to these places, he goes to these sites when there are these natural disasters or when there's war. He's been in North Carolina. I want to talk to him. And there's a lot of reports now, and it's not coming from the Trump campaign. There's a lot of reports that not only is FEMA and the Biden-Harris administration, not only are they late to the Johnny on the spot, if they're there at all, but they're actually now interfering with local charities. There's even one report that they took the foodstuffs from one, put it in their own warehouse, and said, we'll distribute this. We'll make the decision on who gets what. It's in the news. I didn't make it up. But you can see there was a lack of urgency. Even now there's a lack of urgency. It's just, you got Samaritan's Purse. You've got other charities in there, churches in there. You've got volunteers in there, neighbors. You've got veterans in there, flying helicopters and so forth. The American spirit exists. But this is horrendous. Over 200 people dead and still hundreds and hundreds unaccounted for. This is a horrendous thing. And I don't see Harris and Biden taking charge. I just see more photo ops, a couple of speeches, and then off they go. It's like the border. It's like Palestine, Ohio. And we can go on and on. But I want to make a little bit of a turn here. I want to address something because it is still fundamental to the way our society is supposed to function. And that is the justice system. I want to read something to you by Elie Honig. I don't know Elie Honig. I believe he is a legal commentator on CNN. The guy's pretty straight up. Doesn't mean I agree with everything, but I don't have to agree with everything. He's pretty straight up. And he talks about this Jack Smith's October surprise, because, again, they're throwing everything they can to try and take out Trump. Jack Smith has failed in his quest to try Donald Trump before the 2024 election, so instead, the special counsel has bent ordinary procedure to get in one last shot just weeks before voters go to the polls. Well, voters are already going to the polls. Smith has now dropped the 165-page doorstop, meaning this thick document, doorstop of a filing in federal court on the issue of Trump's immunity from prosecution. Judge Tanya Chutkan, that's an Obama appointee, who suddenly claims not to care about the impending election, despite her earlier efforts to expedite the case to get it in before the very same election, which got her reversed and chastised by the U.S. Supreme Court, duly complied with Smith's wishes, redacted out a few obvious names, whoever might Arizona governor redacted page 16 be, and made the rest public. And that would be Ducey, by the way. There are two headlines here, he writes. The immediate takeaway lies in the revelations contained in Smith's oversized brief. He asked the judge, by the way, for and received permission to file a brief that was 180 pages long, 4 times the normal maximum. Normally, you can only file a document that's 40, 45 pages. He asked for 180, and she granted it. She grants him everything. And he writes, we now have damning new details on Trump's effort to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to throw the election his way, Trump's phone use and use of Twitter as the riot unfolded, and his conversations with family members about efforts to contest his electoral loss. The story structure is the same as we've long known, but the new details lend depth and dimension. They lend crap, by the way. But the larger issue, if less obvious, the headline is that Smith has essentially abandoned any pretense. Hell-bent on any rule, he'll bend any rule, rather, switch up any practice so long as he gets to chip away at Trump's electoral prospects. At this point, there is simply no defending Smith's conduct on any sort of principled or institutional basis. Quote, but we need to know this stuff before we vote, is a nice bumper sticker, but it's neither a response to nor an excuse for Smith's unprincipled, norm-breaking practice. It also overlooks the fact that the Justice Department bears responsibility for taking over a 2.5 year period to indict in the first place. Let's go through the problems with what Smith has done here to Trump. First, this is backwards. This is important for you to understand. And the judge rubber-stamped every piece of this. None of this could have happened without her. The way motions work under the federal rules and consistent with common sense is that the prosecutor files an indictment, the defense makes motions to dismiss charges, to suppress evidence, or what have you, and then the prosecution responds to those motions. Makes sense, right? It's only worked for hundreds of years in our courts, but not here. Not when there's an election right around the corner and dwindling opportunity to make a dent. So what happened? So Smith turned the well-established, thoroughly uncontroversial rules of criminal procedure on their head. And he asked Judge Chutkan for permission to file first. even with no actual defense motion pending. So he wasn't responding to anything. He filed his indictments, and then he says, I want to file a motion. Trump's team objected, and the judge acknowledged that Smith's request to file first was, quote, procedurally irregular, unquote, moments before she ruled in Smith's favor, as she's done at every consequential turn. Which brings us to this second point. Smith's proactive filing is prejudicial to Trump legally and politically. It's ironic. Smith has complained throughout the case that Trump's words might taint the jury pool. Accordingly, the special counsel requested a gag order that was so preposterously broad that even Judge Chutkan slimmed it down considerably, and the Court of Appeals narrowed it even further after that. Yet Smith now uses grand jury testimony, which ordinarily remains secret at this stage, and drafts up a tidy 165-page document that contains all manner of damaging statements about a criminal defendant made outside of a trial setting and without being subjected to the rules of evidence or cross-examination. Files it publicly, generating national headlines. You know who'll see those allegations? The voters, sure, and also members of the jury pool. That brings us to our final point. Smith's conduct here violates core Department of Justice principle and policy. The Justice Manual, and I was the first to point this out on Fox, the Justice Manual, that is their internal Bible at DOJ, essentially contains a section titled Actions That May Have an Impact on the Election. Now, does Smith's filing qualify? May it have an impact on the election? Of course. So what does the rule tell us? Quote, federal prosecutors may never select the timing of any action, including investigative steps, criminal charges, or statements, for the purpose of affecting any election. Now remember, Smith begged the judge to flip the rules on their head so he could file this document first and quickly. Any action, by any reasonable definition, with the election right around the corner. Anyone who objected to James Comey's outrageous announcements about Hillary Clinton email investigation on the eve of the 2016 election should feel the same about Smith's conduct now. What's the distinction? I'm going to hand this one over to one of Department of Justice most esteemed alums, who explained it this way to the Justice Department's internal watchdog. Quote, to me, if an election were 90 days off and you think it has a significant chance of impacting an election, unless there's a reason you need to take any action now, you don't do it. Those words were spoken by Sally Yates, former Deputy Attorney General under Barack Obama, venerated career prosecutor, no fan of Trump, who unceremoniously fired her in 2017. And liberal folk hero. As usual, Yates was spot on, and her explanation conveys this indelible truth. If prosecutors bend their principles depending on the identity of the prey, then they've got no principles at all. Every rule was turned on its head, inside out. This judge rubber-stamped it time and time again. That filing should never have been made. She said he could. That filing never should have been made on her calendar. She sets the date. Never should have been done. That filing should never have been made public. She allowed it to be public. That filing never should have contained grand jury information or been as long as it was. But she gave the rubber stamp on that, and they made it public. And now you know what I hear, America? That if Donald Trump's elected president, and if the Democrats take the House, they're going to take this document, and as soon as he's sworn in, try to use it to impeach him and cripple his presidency. They say they believe in democracy. No, they don't. They're Stalinists. Judge Chutkan should be disbarred. If there were an honest legal community in Washington, D.C., she would be disbarred and hence removed from the bench. Jack Smith should be disbarred. If there were an honest legal community in Washington, D.C., he would be disbarred and sent off to The Hague to sell ice cream on the corner.